Hey everyone, this is Mike, and today we're talking about quality of life changes that I would like to see in the game. Now, these aren't things that I'm expecting to come in Endwalker or anytime soon really, but they are things that I think would improve the experience you have as a player, and just some things that I think would be nice to have personally. So let's start off with being able to queue as multiple roles. Now, I personally don't really care too often about what job I'm going to be playing if I'm doing a roulette or if I'm trying to get into a dungeon, for example. Something that is kind of relevant for me right now as well, as I'm trying to queue into certain dungeons and trials to get triple triad cards that drop from them, and more often than not I just don't really care if I'm playing tank, healer or DPS. I just want to get in, do the dungeon and get out as fast as possible so that I don't have to just stand around queuing for it for however long it takes. So it would be great if I could queue as a few different jobs that I feel like playing so that I have the fastest queue possible. Moving on, better macros. Macros in 14 are pretty bad in general. They're okay if you're looking to craft stuff, but when we're looking towards combat macros, they're leaving a lot to be desired. Now, I'm not saying to let us macro whole rotations together, because I wouldn't want that at all, but being able to macro stuff like a shirk to target 2 or a mouse over macro and have them work as if you were using a normal skill, that is what I am talking about. I'm sure we've all been there. When you do a tank swap, you press that shirk macro because you don't want to always have to manually target your co-tank, and you spammed that button a few times, but the macro still didn't go off. I also know that there are some healers out there that will use mouse over macro for some of their healing spells, or for example an astrologian when you're giving out cards, so that you don't have to click on people all the time and then retarget to the boss to keep doing damage. So those would be the two main cases as to why I would want macros to be better. And it's not that they can't be either, because I know that there's a mod out there, I have no idea what it's called, but it basically does exactly that. It makes those kind of macros feel like normal skills, and that is precisely what I want. I just do not want to have to use a mod to get that effect in the game. Then we have level sync. Again, this is something that's relevant to me right now as I'm doing some older content, and it always feels really bad when you get synced down and you lose a bunch of your skills. Like for example, right now I've been playing White Mage a bunch for dungeons because, well, healer queue first of all, and second of all, White Mage is just really good in dungeons, does good damage, wholly stuns enemies, and you also have Benny in case you run into a Dark Knight that wants to use Living Dead, so it basically covers all your bases. But it feels really shit not having Afflatus, Rapture and Misery, and I also don't really see why we would need to lose those skills when we sink down. I get the argument of, if we were to keep everything, then we're stronger than we were intended for said content, but let's face it, we already are. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but look at Yukop and Uwu. Those fights are considerably easier now in terms of their DPS check compared to when they first came out, and you need to be synced to do them. So if prestigious content like that is allowed to be easier, then I don't see why I can't have my level 80 toolkit in a level 70 dungeon, because that content is even more irrelevant than something like an ultimate. It's also not like there's any technical side that makes it difficult, because that is exactly how Blue Mage work. You equip your skills, and it doesn't matter if you're doing Sastasha or the Swallow's Compass, you will have all of your skills available to you. And if I'm not mistaken, it works like that for role skills as well. Once you unlock the role skill, you will always be able to use it regardless of what level you are. So I don't see why they couldn't just make that the case for all jobs in all of the content. Then these last two changes are somewhat similar as they're both interacting with gear sets. First off, materia that is saved to a gear set. I made a video on this a long time ago, but it basically works like this. You equip materia to your gear, and then you save your gear into a gear set. Then after you've saved that, you can extract your materia, put new materia in that same gear, and then save that to a different gear set. And you can now swap melds simply by switching gear sets rather than having to extract and remeld your gear every single time. Now, I know that this isn't relevant to all the jobs in the game, but there are a few that would really benefit from this. If I'm looking at casters, Black Mage wants a lot of spell speed, but then Red Mage and Summoner do not. Tanks, for example, Warrior wants a lot of crit and death, but no direct hit, whereas the other tanks want a decent chunk of direct hit. So if you play any of these jobs, you can't really play them optimally at a high level while still playing flexible, unless you of course want to remeld each time you switch between these jobs. So if you were able to just save your materia to a gear set, then that would solve this issue. I switched to my Black Mage and all of my melds are changed to a more spell speed focused build, but if I then switch to my Red Mage, for example, my melds will go back to a slower spell speed build that better suits Red Mage. I believe some people said on the previous video that it would make materia irrelevant because you're not not using as much of it, but you would still need to melt your materia into each gear set, so that wouldn't necessarily be the case. The only people that really would be saving materia like this are the ones that would literally remelt each time they switch jobs, and I don't really think there's many people out there that would do that. I personally just melt my main job to best in slot, and then if I decide to play another job, well, they'll just have to play with messed up melts. And then last but not least, the glamour plates and the glamour dresser. I know that these are already a thing, but I want them to be more accessible. It would be cool for the glamour dresser to have all of your gear available that you've acquired at some point, instead of having to store the gear that you might want to use later. And then there's also the limited slots that you're working with. As for glamour plates, it would be nice that there would just be more of them, and you can also edit and equip them anywhere. I know that right now you can, for example, link glamour plates to gear sets, so when you switch between jobs of the same role, you can have different glamours for them, but that doesn't work when you're in the open world, because glamour plates don't work them. Do you remember Yoshi saying that there's some technical aspect that makes all of this kind of difficult, but it doesn't mean that I wouldn't like to see it, of course, because it would be really fun if I could just be on my machinist, have my machinist specific glam, then switch to my dancer, for example, and have some different glamour for that. Of course, you can already link the plates, but it would be nice if that also worked in the open world. So those are the quality of life changes that I would like to see in the game for quite some time now, and I'm sure that if I were to give it some thought, I can think of a few more, but these are the main ones that I have been thinking of. Let me know in the comments what some of the changes would be that you would like to see, and with that, I want to thank you for watching, I want to thank my Patreons for their support, and I'll see you in the next one.